This more relaxed summer season is no reprieve for Trump's three largest vulnerabilities: the unpopular Iran policy, under strain today, as we've been reporting, the high prices, and the Epstein scandal, which has endured with new witnesses on Capitol Hill. And it's a flashpoint for grassroots voters. We have new footage from a Republican congressman's new town hall.
What are you going to do for benefits for all people with disabilities?
Well, under the One Big Beautiful Bill, we protected a system that if it had gone unchecked, it would not have been long-term available for the very people that are the most vulnerable.
Why do you continue to protect the pedophiles and Trump's DOJ as they continue to break the law?
That's what the pushback sounds like in the rare district where an incumbent Republican's even holding these kind of meetings. The affordability crisis, huge. Half of Americans struggle to pay for the basics. And even the other half of those doing better agree the nation is facing this affordability crisis under Trump, a problem that has worsened as the Trump administration cuts food assistance. Tonight, we have new reporting that housing foreclosures hit a 7-year high. Now, unlike, say, a Depression era, this is a crisis that comes along with deeper tension because everyone can see the rich getting richer. More U.S. CEOs have crossed what was the once rare pay threshold of $100 million a year for the first time in 5 years. Wall Street's been doing great since Trump came back. Corporate leaders and the minority of elites who have stocks, they're all up. But that's driving a gulf that even has MAGA Republicans mad. Megyn Kelly recently slamming what she called Trump's grift while regular people struggle. Trump and his family reaping windfalls from their own conflicts of interest and self-dealing, over $2 billion last year alone. Kelly and Tucker Carlson are leading a growing backlash on the right, while independents and liberals are turning to more democratic socialists as one answer to address all this greed. It's enough to make you want to holler, as the old line goes. It's something Dylan Ratigan famously did on this network when he called out corporate greed and what he called the, quote, banksters, taking advantage while regular people work hard and suffer. Mm-hmm. I just showed the evidence, the foreclosures hitting this high, the affordability crisis, and this inequality. What's happening? Is it fixable?
What's happening is the greatest concentration of wealth probably that's even more than what we saw during the robber barons at this point, just by magnitude. So concentration of wealth is what's happening. Anybody that can obviously observe that. To make it not happen would mean that you have to understand why it's happening, I guess. And from my perspective, the reason why it's happening is because it's easier to make money through some form of extraction or gatekeeping than through creation. And so as long as it's legal or permissible to get money through some extractive mechanism or through some gatekeeping mechanism where you exploit leverage or permit access or whatever it is, some form of exclusivity that's unnatural, that's always an easier way to create money than by creating actual value. And so because the American culture so admires and looks up to the true creators of value, I think it's one of the best things about this country, actually, that goodwill for extremely creative, innovative people gets borrowed by people who are making money through extractive or gatekeeping techniques, basically, that where the clothing of a creative entrepreneur and the status of a creative entrepreneur, they're actually on the opposite side of that.
A charlatan in founder's clothing, as it were.
Well, I mean, they even might be a founder, but there's somebody whose value proposition is that you lose and they win, as opposed to a value proposition where you win, I win. And that is, I think, the most important filter and the most important abuse of the American dream, and actually the biggest insult to true creators who create real value, is the borrowing. It's like there's the animals in the wild that pretend to be, some other thing that they're not in order to sneak into the Beaver Lodge or whatever it is. And so I think that...
Well, I don't know if they're sneaking to the
wherever they're trying to sneak.
Can beavers make a lodge? Are you referring...
Listen, I was just in the Adirondacks, and so I got beavers on the mind. But, my point is that there is the true creators, and then there are those who pretend to be creators who then are actually in some way removing value.
And inequality.
that then allows for a massive, because it's easier to make money through corruption effectively, whether it's monopoly markets, whether it's unique access over the government, whatever the
But you think inequality is the issue? In other words,
no, I don't. Everybody knows inequality is the issue.
Yeah.
And what we're witnessing right now amounts to what everybody on Wall Street they call the K-shaped economy. I'm sure you've used that phrase. You've probably done graphics on the show, where the economy right now is actually benefiting a portion of the people in this country, and that it's harming the others. I mean, the other thing that you have to understand in America, in terms of how things sort of play out on the policy side, is it's really the only country in the world where capital is enshrined with rights that are superior to humans.
Right.
Which doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So then the interest of capital sometimes, or even as technology advances more frequently, are at the direct expense of humans.
Yes,
and that's sort of what makes things politically very interesting, I think.
Well, and this is why you make clear points as you're driving to the depth of it. It's the same when you have a fiduciary duty under law where you're saying, actually, more than the labor value or the long-term rights of the community, or whether we destroy the world around us,
or whether we create anything of value,
at all,
anybody.
We actually not have to.
Our job is to optimize for how much money we make.
Not that we have to return on investment. That's great. Not that we have to even say big return. No, we have to optimize maximum value, meaning you're always putting it above labor, the environment, everything else.
Financial results, and that's a reasonable mandate if the rulemaking is you can only make money by creating actual value.
Yeah. Now, I want you to hold the old saying, we're going to now go and break into the Beaver's Lodge. Everybody knows.
As they all say.
Nature.
This is a long-known phrase.
We set up a reminder of why people are now worried about a bubble on the left and the right. You're the right person for this, so stay with me. But you have the Trump Treasury Department now has what's an internal report. They didn't release it, saying there could be an AI bubble. It warns of risks posed by this current version of the AI market and makes a comparison many have said. Is this like the dot-com bubble, which, of course, hurt a lot of regular Americans? And there's a lot of talk about this.
Concerns over the rising cost of artificial intelligence. It led to a major tech stock sell-off that dragged down the S&P and NASDAQ.
All great technology changes produce bubbles.
Artificial intelligence gives a massive boost to the markets, but for how long?
So what's the end? Is it a bubble that bursts eventually?
I think it is, yes.
This doesn't have to be inevitable. The Times notes, though, that when you look at Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook's parent company, Meta, they're going to spend $700 billion this year alone. You can think of that as a bill that might come due. We should also note that the big AI companies are, for the most part, losing money. If you want a sign of the inequality that Radigan just mentioned and the famed irrational exuberance, Elon Musk has a new company, SpaceX, which was valued by the markets at one point as equal to Amazon. One company has been around for decades, makes a lot of money. The other is losing money. Have we lost the plot? We put the question to you, Dylan Radigan.
I mean, I think it's self-evident that there's certainly a price. When you don't know the value of something, which we saw this in 99, for instance, you basically assign the most optimistic or most pessimistic, depending on the flow of the sort of momentum of the underlying data. And so in this case, because no one really knows when, exactly how, where, et cetera, it's just been assigned the most optimistic narrative, which is AI can do anything. And it is, will do everything, and all the things that we've all heard. I think that the most interesting insight in terms of facts relative to artificial intelligence are in that SpaceX prospectus, which is their investment offering document, which is entirely where they have to reveal what are the basic assumptions. Why should we give you this money for this company, for this thing? And what are your assumptions? And if you look at what the business is now, it doesn't have anything to do with what they sold as a stock. What they sold as a stock was 93% based on the idea that artificial intelligence would grow by 10,000% in the next 5 years, and that 60% of the computer-based jobs, any job that's done with interacting with the computer, would be done by AI, such that instead of having that the revenue, the reason you can justify 10,000% growth is, well, if I'm going to swap the humans for the robots, I can get to that point. And so if you really want to sort of something to have a referendum on, you're like, okay, do I really think 60% of the computer-based jobs will be gone in the next 5 years, which is what the SpaceX prospectus says? And even if that's technically possible,
Yeah.
what are the political consequences of that, and what's the political resistance to that, and the humanity of Gen Z?
Right, a jobs crisis. And let me ask, I mean, in psychology, they call that motivated reasoning.
Okay.
And in journalism, they call it bias.
Of course.
Where you want to get
Goldman
to that
Sachs
outcome.
and J.P. Morgan have to tell a story.
Right.
But the point is, whether Goldman and J.P. Morgan, who wrote that story and published that story and sold that story, or SpaceX, who supported that story, right? Because SpaceX was sold not based on the value of the business that exists at all. SpaceX was sold based on the percentage of the total addressable market.
And let me throw one more headline at you. Jeff Bezos, he's got also a space company. And just today, the news is coming out. They want $130 billion valuation, and they want billions.
You're talking about this is Blue Origin?
Blue Origin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, I don't always use jargon because not everyone's heard of Blue Origin yet.
Blue Origin is a name of a thing. I wouldn't even call that jargon. I don't know somebody's name.
Not
like
okay, all right, not jargon,
but like Ari, then you're Ari. If I call you bro,
how about like, more insidery than it needs to be? Bottom line is Bezos has a space company like Musk. My final question.
Maybe the people would like to know the name of the company.
Oh my God!
All right,
you can tell that we know each other. 40 seconds left.
Go.
Should an honest government that's safeguarding the economy for the public be more involved in what right now looks like hundreds of billions of dollars of capital transfer to those companies and these looming AI IPOs if this is going to cause wide risk?
Yes. The issue is not the need for regulatory intervention to deal with. This will be the biggest political change in our lifetimes. It's going to make the horse and buggy look like not much, although not that I was here for that. The issue is lack of trust in the government under both parties.